So, okay. So, folks, yesterday is quite a development area we saw. Okay. So, we go step by step today. If possible, we'll go till the scheduling. But maybe NiFi scheduling may not be possible. We'll see. At least we'll do the cron scheduler. At least we'll do the cron scheduler. All right. The reason why I'm telling you NiFi is quite hard is completely the VMs are very unstable today. I'm not sure why. So I'm just trying it to increase the size and everything, but it is quite unstable today. I think this is working up. Okay. So these are the step executions. We'll see that. Okay. So how that works, what is a kind of a step-by-step process we have to follow, that we'll discuss today. Right? You remember yesterday I told about one important step. What is it actually, folks? What is it? It is? Can you see that in my screen?
Yes, sir.
Running state. Right? It's a running state. Can it failed? Let's see. Failed, but it is working. It's working. That's okay. Let's have it local. That's fine. This is working. Let's terminate this cluster. Terminated. Now, as we started yesterday, right? It's going to be a quite scheduling level as well. All right. We'll see whether we can able to schedule it in the cron today, at least, instead of NiFi, the cron scheduler. But we'll go a step-by-step process, folks. Firstly, before I start today, yesterday, did you understood that logic? We got a requirement. We started an EMR cluster. Then I put I put all the code in the EMR cluster. All right. Then I have put the code in my Eclipse. So far, all good. All of you understood? Yes. Folks, yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Shall I give a recap of what we have done yesterday just for 5 to 10 minutes? So then start.
Yes,
Sir.
We'll start today's session so that you'll get everything on place. Because cloud development and cloud deployment is quite a big process. Folks, why? The cloud development has lot of work to do. Cloud development and deployment has lot of work to do. Why? More than on-premises, cloud development takes, extra steps to execute, including the deployment. Why? What could be a possible reason? Any idea? See, the run is simple. What I mean to say is execution is simple, but the steps are more. I repeat, I have an on-premises cluster. I want to do it in an AWS cluster. The execution in AWS is quite simple, accessible, easy, but the steps are more. Why? What could be a possible reason?
Security?
No.
No, we have to do everything instead of admin job.
To automate our jobs, we need to do manual first of all.
It's not like that. Folks, I would like to tell you why the AWS development and deployment has a lot of steps is on-premises cluster, right? On-premises cluster runs 24/7. You got the point, all of you? It keeps running every day, every minute. You just log in, do the do the work and close the putty. That's it. That cluster will not turn off. It runs 24/7. But what about in AWS cluster or Azure cloud environments? Tell me, folks. It runs whenever required. Yes or no? You getting my point here or not? All of you? In the on-premises cluster, the cluster runs 24/7. But in the cloud environment, it runs whenever required. So we have to take care of start and stop of the cluster. You got the reason, all of you here, basically. Yes or no? All of you here?
Yes, sir.
In on-premises, you need not to take care of it. That cluster runs all the time. But here, we have to take care of everything. That's the only difference. Anyway, that you will come to know today. Today itself, you'll come to know that. All right. Now, how did we start our work yesterday? Let me remove all the destination. My goodness. 1 minute. Fine, all good. Now, let's start with the 5 to 10 minutes. Let's give a recap of what we have ended yesterday. And I'll start today's session. Folks, the reason for me to handle yesterday's session so that you'll connect all the dots. More than the technical perspective, understand the process in the cloud deployment. How we develop in the cloud, how we deploy it in the cloud. Understand the step-by-step process. All right. Now imagine, as I told you, take out our boss. What does our boss stated? As simple as that. Concentrate. Sai, we have a requirement. Sai, we have a requirement that we have 2 buckets. You remember this yesterday's requirement, all of you? We have 2 buckets. Zayo.dev, Zayo.prod. These are the buckets we have. You remember this, all of you? Here? Yeah?
Yes, sir.
Zayo.dev, Zayo.prod bucket. Inside it, I have source directory and the destination directory. Inside it, I have source directory and the destination directory. Right? These are the 2 buckets available in my cloud environment, in my S3 bucket. Right? This is my dev environment. This is my prod environment. This is my dev bucket. That is my prod bucket. So I have a source data sitting up here. I have a source data sitting up here. Both has source data, SRC and SRC. All right. Now, I want to write the data available and not available customers. Available and not available. I want 2 customers to be available, to be written into my destination folder. I have a folder known as dest. My folder name is dest, which I have it in my same bucket. I have a dest folder, but I am expecting to have the data to have available customers and not available customers to be written in the dest folder. Understood, all of you so far? That's what we have started yesterday. Now, I have the data. So what I'll quickly do, right? I'll go to AWS, right? I'll go to AWS. Here I'll create a cluster. Create cluster. All right. Now, development. All right. Which launch mode I have to select here? Tell me which launch mode I have to select during the development.
Cluster.
Cluster. I have to select the launch mode cluster. Spark. Give one node cluster. Which series is better to choose for big data? It is
R series.
R series. R series is better. Take any key pair and launch the cluster. So this cluster takes almost 5 minutes to switch on, 3 minutes to 4 minutes approximately. Initially, it would be in the starting state, then it goes to running state, then it goes to waiting state. Meanwhile, let's talk about, right? Meanwhile, let's talk about the deployment, AWS prod deployment. Right? AWS prod deployment. Now you tell me how to start with. How many steps do I have for AWS prod deployment? If you want to achieve AWS prod deployment, what is the first step you do? Tell me, folks. AWS, did you remember the diagram yesterday? Yes or no?
Yes, yes.
Project development.
AWS project code development. AWS project code development. You start with AWS project code development, folks. That's your first and foremost goal. Mute, please mute. Right? AWS project code development. What's next? Tell me.
Step execution.
AWS EMR step execution.
AWS EMR
Step
step execution development. Again, that's a development. Yes or no, folks? Getting my point or not here? Again, it's a development. AWS EMR step execution development. What's next point? Tell me.
Command result.
AWS EMR command runner
design.
AWS EMR command runner design. We do AWS command runner design. Designed your command runner. What's last? Tell me.
Schedule the command.
Schedule the command runner.
Schedule the command runner. Schedule the command runner. So these are the steps we have discussed yesterday, but we can able to complete only one step yesterday. Today we'll go with the other ones. The major one is already covered. The last one we'll cover. We'll go step-by-step process today. But what we going to do, by the time I got the requirement, first I'll start my cluster to start my development. I'll start my development by spinning on a cluster, by switching on a cluster. So that's the reason I have switched on my cluster here. My cluster is ready. Now log into the cluster. All right. Log into the cluster. Hadoop. Log into the private key. Log in for it. That's it. My EMR cluster is ready to start my development. My EMR cluster is ready to start my development. Right? But it is still in the starting state. We have to wait till it comes to running state. Waiting state. So still my cluster is in the starting state. Right? We have to wait till it come to the running state. Then only I can start my development process. Now my cluster is ready. It is getting ready. But meanwhile, I also told you, I have to start my development in the Spark shell. I have to start my development in the Spark shell. Open the Spark shell, develop my code, put it into Eclipse. But tell me something, folks. I need extra Avro jar to start my development. How did we get that extra jar? Tell me. Using packages.
Group ID.
Open Spark, right? Spark Avro Maven. It will download on go, right? We saw that yesterday. Start the package. Start the Avro jar. Give the version. All right. That's it. My Spark shell will open, but meanwhile, let's recheck. Okay, it's in the waiting state now. Perfect. It's ready to start the development. Let's go inside Spark shell now. Now the Spark shell is getting opened, right? Now let's start our development. This will download the Spark Avro jar on the fly. This will download Spark Avro jar on the fly. That's it. All set. Let's start our development. Quick development. Okay. The same code what we have developed yesterday. Take the import statements first. Done. Then let's hit the URL and get the data. This is URL SSL data. That's it. I got the URL data on place. Then convert into RGD. Convert it to data frame. Then explode the array column. Then flatten it completely. Right? I'm flattening it completely. Avro, read the Avro file now. Then numdf. Replace with nulls. Numericals with null. Join the data frame. Filter, get the available customers. Get the not available customers. Write it the available customers and not available customers. You got the point, all of you here? Is it now we have to write it? Agreed or not? All of you here?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
So folks, under the dest folder, I'm using SciDir here. Which directory? Who is writing the data now? Tell me. Sci is writing the data. Just I'm adding one more folder at the end. What is that folder? It is SciDir. Inside my bucket, inside my dest folder, inside SciDir, I want to write available. Inside the bucket, inside dest folder, inside SciDir, I want to write not available customers. Let's write it. Then available customers, then I'll write not available customers also. Yes, let's write not available customers also. That's it. Let's go back and check whether my S3 got the available and not available customers. SciDir got created. Inside SciDir, I got available and not available. Can you see that, all of you? Leave about this objects. This is just an object. Can you see available folder? It's a file. For every folder, it creates an object here, folks. When you try to write it, for every folder, it creates an object. All right. So it kinds of, when I go with the subfolders, folks, when I write so many subfolders, it always creates an object. You know why this object is created? Any idea why this object is created? See, this is the folder, folks. But can you see it created a file object for that folder? Can you see that? Actually, for every folder it creates a file object. See, available folder, file object. See, it's a file. Logo is file. This is folder. For not available folder, again, it created a not available folder file object. Why it creates this? For backup. For backup. If any data goes wrong, when we put this data somewhere in the backup, we can easily get it back using this object for backing up. So this available and not available customers are created. If you see inside, you'll have Parquet files. Do that make sense to all of you? Do the development is completed or not here? Yes? Getting it or not?
Yes.
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah. Now what's next? My development is completed. Now what I'll do, I'll come out of Spark Shell, go to EMR. What I'll do, I will terminate my cluster. That's it. My development is completed. Terminate. That's it.
Backup also.
No, backup is in S3, right? So backup is in S3, not in EMR. Okay. So that it is terminated. Now, available customers and not available customers got generated. But who generated that? Through which tool I have used to generate? Which tool I have used to generate? Tell me. Which tool? Which tool? Tool is Spark. Where does the Spark run just now? In the which service it has run to develop? to get this available, not available. EMR. That's it. My work is completed. I closed it. This is the development phase. This is completed. Mute. Because mute. Please. Lot of concentration I require. Please consider. Anyone from Nagarjuna University joined, kindly leave. Kindly leave. Even yesterday, I got 15 to 20 people joined. I cannot change the meeting. I cannot disturb batch 36 now. I don't want to concentrate on them. Any third year Nagarjuna University folks joined, kindly leave. Yeah. Fine. The dev part is completed. AWS project code dev part is completed. Still, the development is not yet done. If it is an on-premises, your development is done. You just have to develop the Spark shell, Spark code, and you can complete your development. Absolutely. If it is your on-premises cluster. But as it is a cloud environment, as this deal with the cloud environment, folks, right? We have to think a bit, right? How it is difference, like just by developing a code doesn't mean that your development is completed in the cloud environment. You should also develop a command runner script. What is a command runner script? Right? Before command runner, that is closely associated with a step execution. Now, what I told to my boss, Sai stated, boss, I have created my own cluster and I opened Spark shell and executed my commands, my Spark code. The data is expected in the dev bucket, right? Dev bucket. I have created my own cluster. I opened the Spark shell and executed my Spark code, and the data is expected in the dev bucket. Is showing as expected. Is showing as expected in the dev bucket. Then my boss replied back. What would be the next point? Yesterday we told that. Can you export this code as a jar? Can you export this code as a jar and do Spark submit? All right. And do Spark submit in the same cluster. Is it not the request, all of you? Yes or no? Getting it or not, all of you?
Yes, sir.
Export. Can you export this code as a jar and do Spark submit in the same cluster? Or in the EMR cluster, we can say, in the EMR cluster. I stated, shall I start a cluster? Okay. I will create a jar of that code and I'll start a cluster and copy that jar to the cluster and run the jar. Right? I will create a jar. Sure. I will start a cluster. Sure. Copy that jar to the cluster and run it. Right? What is saying, folks, in my current situation, all right, in this particular diagram, concentrate. I created a EMR cluster, EMR Spark environment. I've just created. this EMR Spark environment, whatever I just created, whatever the code I have executed, it took a data from source and returned to test. Just a pure development so far happened. Then I develop my code. Happily, I open my Spark shell. I open my Spark shell and develop my code. My code is ready right now. Now, what my boss is asking, hey, take that code first. Take that code and export it as what? What is asking me to export? Tell me. Export it to jar. Convert it into jar. And take this jar to the same dev environment and run it. Leave about the production. We'll come to the production shortly. Take this code into a jar and write it in and using the jar, run it. And let's see by the time you run the jar, whether same available and not available customers are getting created or not. That's what he's asking. What I stated, hey, I export it as a jar and I'll create an EMR cluster and do Spark submit. That's what my question was. Everyone understood, all of you? I stated, I'll export it as a jar, boss. First, I'll take the jar, right? I'll export this as a jar, right? Then I'll create a normal cluster. Then I'll take the jar to the EMR cluster and do the Spark submit. Understood it or not? All of you here? Yes? I'll do Spark submit. Getting it or not? All of you here? Yes?
Sir.
What I stated, I repeat. I'll export that code to jar. I'll create an EMR cluster. That jar I will copy to the EMR cluster and do Spark submit. But my boss denied it. Sai, if you are doing it, there is no difference between on-premises and the cloud environment. If you are doing it, hey, create a cluster, copy the jar, doing a Spark submit, it's just like an on-premises. In on-premises, cluster will be running all the time. Copy the jar, run the Spark submit. It's just like an on-premises. You should not do that. No, this is not the ideal way. Don't do that. This is not the ideal way. Create an EMR cluster to develop your code, but not to run the jar. Create your EMR cluster. Happily create your EMR cluster. Open Spark shell and do your development. But don't run the jar. Right? Don't run the jar. Right? Then what I have to do? What I have to do? Right? Boss stated, see, very important point, folks. What is the major advantage of cloud environment? What is the major advantage of cloud environment? Folks, can anyone tell me that? What is the major advantage of cloud environment? Because everything works on demand.
Automation.
High scalability.
Automation. No,
High scalability.
I'm talking about especially the run. What is the major advantage of cloud environment? My boss added a point. Right? You can create cluster, run Spark submit, terminate the cluster automatically. You need not to do completely a manual work. See, you need not to create a cluster, do a Spark submit, and terminate the cluster. You need not to do it. AWS can do it. Just give the jar to AWS. Give the jar to AWS. All right? It starts the cluster, run the jar, stops the cluster. In other words, technical words, spin on the cluster. The word we have to use is spin on. It's a technical kind of a word, right? Technical phrase. Spin on the cluster, which is to create a cluster, run Spark submit, terminate the cluster. You got it or not? All of you here? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Now, what is the only way? See, AWS can start a cluster, run the Spark submit, terminate the cluster. It can do it automatically. What is that process known as? You
Transient.
need not to start a cluster. You need not to manually do a Spark submit. You need not to terminate a cluster to run the jar. AWS can do it automatically. We call that process as step execution. What does that mean, folks? Tell me.
Step execution.
Step execution. We call that as step execution. What is a step execution? The definition is about it creates a cluster, run the Spark submit, terminate the cluster. You got the point, all of you? What I mean? It start the cluster, run the Spark submit, terminate the cluster. Automatically it happens. Right? How that is possible? We call it as a step execution. Just give the jar to AWS. You need not to manually create it. You need not to manually submit it. You need not to manually terminate it. If you are doing everything manually, it's a on-premises way of processing cluster. But this is not on-premises. This is not on-premises. This is purely the cloud environment. How you deal this in the cloud environment? We call it as a step execution. We call it as a step execution. Fine. Right? Now have a check, all of you. How to automate this in the step execution. Rajesh, Ganesh Ram. I think so. You're from Nagarjuna University. Please leave. I mean, we are no more allowing them. Other departments didn't connect today. Please leave. Please. Yeah. I just got a notification from Gomati. That's the reason we found. See, please don't join. Yeah. Now, this is how we can start a cluster, run the Spark submit, terminate a cluster. We call that process as what? Tell me. It's a step execution. Now, let's trigger a step execution. All of you ready? See, what is step execution, folks? You itself tell me. What is step execution? In 3 words, what will you say? What is step execution?
Start, run and terminate.
Spark submit, terminate.
Terminate. That should run in your mind. Clear, all of you? What should run in your mind? Start a cluster, run Spark jar, terminate cluster. Start a cluster, run Spark jar, terminate the cluster. Just have that in the mind. Right? Now, how that is possible? Now, let's do one thing. Folks, have a check now. Is this my final version of code? Yes or no? Final gold copy of the code? Yes or no? Yeah. Now, what I'll do, I will generate this as a jar. I have this as a code. All right. Now, let's start the step-by-step process. Folks, step execution steps. Step execution steps. The first step generate the jar with your code. What's your first step, folks? Tell me. Generate the jar with the code. I have put my code in my Eclipse. All right. Now, right click, run as Maven build. All right. You have to type package. Folks, you remember I've showed it in the gold video, the Spark submit. All of you remember that?
Yes, sir. Sir, yes.
What's happening? You remember it or not? All of you I'm asking.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I'm not sure how many
Yes,
folks
sir.
are not. I'm not sure how many folks. I can understand here. I'm not sure how many folks forget it. We are not learning to forget. Try to understand that. You have to keep revising it. Anyway, take this project, right click, run as Maven build. Package. By the time you give the package, it generates the jar. It will say build success. It will say build success. That means your jar is generated. Where can we find the jar? You tell me, where can we find the jar?
In the project path.
Target.
Wonderful. Anyway, forget it, folks. Forget everything. Forget everything. Forget everything. Learn today and forget tomorrow. There's no point of learning, okay? Talking about others. Target, okay? In target, you will find your jar. Right click. If you just refresh this target, Now you got it. If you see, your jar will be available here. Got it, all of you? It's not your .jar file. Yes?
Right.
Yes or no?
Yes.
This is your .jar file.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Now this jar file will have the entire code sitting inside it. This jar file will have the entire code sitting inside it. Now get this jar. If you go to this path, this is your jar. Is this your jar holding entire code, all of you? Yes?
Yes, sir. Sir, yes.
This is a jar which holds the entire code of yours. I made my jar code to export it as a jar file. Now the jar is available. That's your first step. Is it done, all of you?
Yes, I.
It's done.
Second step. Copy the jar to any path in S3. Copy the jar to any path in S3. What does that mean? Where I have to copy this jar first? Tell me. I have to copy it to
S3.
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 AWS S3. Now what I'll do, I'll go to the dev bucket. Folks, let me remove the entire test folders, okay? Because we are going to regenerate it. Let me remove the entire folders generated in the test. All right. Completely test is empty. Completely test is empty because I'm going to regenerate it using step execution. Now I completely removed it. Now I have the dev bucket. Where I have source and destination. Now I'll copy this jar to the dev environment. Right? I'm uploading it. That's it. Your jar is available where? Folks, where the jar is available now? In my dev. S3 bucket. I copied this jar to the S3 bucket. First, what did I do? First, I took that code and put it in my Eclipse. That Eclipse, I generated the jar. I copied the jar to my dev bucket. I copied the jar to my dev bucket. Now my jar is available. Do the second step is clear? All of you here? Yes?
Yes.
Done. Now there comes the actual step. Go to EMR, create a step execution cluster to run this jar. Concentrate, folks. Main step. Go to EMR, create a step execution cluster to run this jar. Folks, everybody is with me so far? Yes?
Yes, sorry.
Go to EMR, create a step execution cluster. It's not a usual cluster. It's a step execution cluster to run this jar. I would like to ask you a question. What is step execution? First, what is step execution?
Start cluster.
Start
run
cluster,
Spark jar,
run
submit.
Spark jar,
Run Spark
terminate.
submit and
Terminate.
terminate the
Cluster.
cluster.
Remember that, okay? Now it comes the actual thing. Now go to EMR. Jar is copied, folks. What is the jar path I have? Folks, where is my jar? Sitting in my...
S3.
Dev.
Folks, this is my path, correct? Is this my path in my dev where jar is sitting? Yeah. In S3, under dev bucket, my Spark jar is sitting. Now go to EMR. All right, folks. If you when you have EMR available, I mean, you can use this console or switch to old console. All right. If you go to switch to old console, it gets back to the original one because I got used to this console. Somehow I have to get used to the new one, but they're changing the UI. After September, you'll not see this UI also, basically. So, but I'm getting used to. I already got used to it. I'm continuing the same. Maybe I have to practice the new console. Now, what I have to do? Tell me. Tell me. I have to create a cluster. Now check, folks. Cluster name, dev deployment. Dev deployment. What is it, folks? Tell me. It is dev deployment. Now you tell me, what is my launch mode this time? This time, what is my launch mode?
Step execution.
This time, my way of cluster is step execution. I am not launching my cluster for the development purpose. No, this is a step execution. Now let's select the step execution here. Now the entire step changes at the bottom, right? Now concentrate. Add steps. Add steps. Now I have to add a step. Now step type. Can you tell me what is my step type among all the steps? You tell me, is it a Hive? Is it a
Custom
pay?
jar.
Spark application.
Which is that?
Yes, Spark application.
Spark application.
Spark application. It's not a custom jar. It's a Spark application. All right. Give the Spark application as a type. Step type is Spark application. Now I have to what? Check out here. What is it? Configure. Now I have to configure. Can you see a box open right now? All of you? Yes?
Yes.
A box open. Anyway, we'll talk about this box. Okay? I will talk about this box. Just give me 1 minute. Before we start talk about this box, folks, this is my jar. I'm very worried to ask this question, but anyway. What is your Spark submit command to run this jar? Can anyone tell me Spark submit command to run this jar?
Spark submit the master with deployment mode and followed by executors. number of executors, and memory of the execution.
I'll ask you the different
And
way.
jar path.
How many of you don't remember this? So everyone remembers Spark Summit command, huh? Shall I pick up few people to ask this question?
No sign.
Why are we learning gold video, folks? Why
Yes,
are we
sir.
learning gold video?
Yes, I.
Anyway. What is Spark submit command to run this jar is Spark submit master yarn or local -- deploy mode client or cluster -- packages. Why we need packages here? Tell me why we need packages here. Avro jar.
Jar.
We need that Avro jar. Right? We need that Avro jar in place. Then -- num executors -- executor course -- executor memory. We give all these parameters. Yes or no, all of you?
Yes, I. Yes, I.
Anyway, as of now, I'm running on one node cluster. Let's not do this. All right. Now, packages are done. Then -- class
Last name.
pack.obj, then the jar path. Folks, all of you remember the Spark Summit command or not?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
This is your Spark Summit command, boss. Please try to remember things. To run a Spark jar, there is a command. Spark submit -- master yarn. They are local. Deploy mode, client. Give the packages. Give the class name, pack.obj. From where this pack.obj is coming from? Because in our 1 minute. Yeah. So folks, what is the package name I created here? Tell me. You tell me. Pack. What is my object name? Pack, obj. Right? I have to say inside this jar, where is my object to run? You have to give that as a class. Then you have to give the jar path. Getting it or not, all of you right now? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
This is your
Yes,
Spark
sir.
submit command. This Spark submit command you have to give. Now, that's what. One sec, folks. Now, that's what this box says. This Spark submit command is nothing but this box. I'll tell you what is it. Have a check. I selected step execution. Select Spark application. Configure. You will get this big box. Right? Folks, deploy mode. Client or cluster, which is better? You tell me, client or cluster? You tell me. Now it's an interview question.
Client.
When I run in the cloud environment, which is better, client or cluster?
Cluster.
When I run in the cloud
Cluster.
environment, whether it is client is
Cluster.
better, cluster is better.
Client.
Cluster.
What is the difference between
Cluster.
client and cluster? Deploy mode.
Client means
driver
we
program-
run in the
driver program
environment,
sits in the
on
worker node.
PC.
For cluster.
Cluster, yeah. What is cluster? Driver program sits in the one of the data nodes. Client means it sits in edge node or master node. Always cloud environment should go with better for client. Because this is the only job going to run. If I have multiple jobs, edge node or master node don't want to take a burden. That's the reason I assign one among the cluster nodes. Since this is the only job which is going to trigger, this is the only job master or edge node is going to monitor, always better to go with client. in the cloud environments. Next, Spark submit options. What is the Spark submit options? Can you tell me that? These are your Spark submit options. You got the point, all of you? These are your Spark submit option. Master yarn. Deploy mode is not required. I already gave at the top, right? Packages. Avro jar, class name. These are your Spark submit options. But some time ago, I faced an issue with local. I'm giving local itself here. Okay. I'm giving local itself. Master local, packages, Spark Avro, and the class object. What is my application location? What is this application location mean? What is this says? Can you see this? Can you see this?
Jar location.
Jar along
Jar
with
path.
package and class name.
Take the jar path. Give it here. Take the jar path. Give it here. Now have a check. Folks, have a check. I configuring it. Spark application. I gave master, packages, Avro, and everything. And I gave application location. Now give add. It automatically designs its Spark Summit. Can you see this, all of you? It designed its own Spark Summit by giving all the inputs. Yes or no? Getting it or not? All of you? I'll reconfigure it. Don't worry. I'll reconfigure it. I'm closing it. Imagine I started for the fresh time. I want to start a cluster. Right? Switching to old console. Create a cluster. Now, in this cluster, just give it as, right? Dev deployment. Go to step execution. Step type. What is the step type? It is Spark application. Configure. Which is better to select in deploy mode? Tell me it is client. Now check -- master local. Better to go with local. Some time ago, I faced some issues with yarn. Maybe because of one node cluster, that's okay. Local -- packages. Give packages. Give packages. -- class. Pack.obj. Then give the jar path. Application jar. Add it here. It creates its own Spark Summit. Can you see that, all of you? Yes? Now, which series cluster it's better to choose? It is R series. Always R series is better. Let's not take a chance. Let's give only one node. That's it. One node works as master and slave. That's okay. Right? Now it is done. All good. Folks, do they make sense, all of you? So far, all good? Yeah. Now, what I did. One sec, folks. Who is that? Banuk? Okay, let me remove. Banu, don't raise your hand, please, Banu. Please, it's interrupting me. Please, Banu. Yeah. Now, I selected step execution. I gave the run to Pujar to run. Now, is it all set, all of you? That's it. Now, shoot the cluster. Now, this is not a usual cluster, folks. This is a step execution cluster. What does that step execution mean? Can anyone tell me what does that step execution cluster mean here? Cluster turns on. Cluster turns on. Run the jar. Cluster turns off. This is a step execution cluster. It's not a usual cluster, folks. This is a step execution cluster. It starts the cluster, run the jar, terminates the cluster. One question. Sai, are you sure this will run the cluster? I mean to say, this will run the job like that. This will run that step or not? Where can I see that step? Folks, can you anywhere see among the panels at the top steps?
Monitoring.
No. Can you see steps tab
Yeah,
at the top?
Steps.
Yeah.
Yes.
Second last
Yes, sir.
one.
Yes, sir.
Check the steps tab here. If you go here, you will see that Spark step. Check. Step. Which application is running here? Tell me.
Spark application.
Spark application. If you see, if you elaborate it, you have a well way to elaborate it. If you see, if you expand this, is this your Spark submit? All of you? The entire, yeah. Spark submit, deploy mode client, master local, packages, class, and then the jar path. Right? So this step is ready to run. You know what this will do? What is, folks, you tell me. You tell me. Very, very best one to inform you folks. Very best time to tell you this. How many launch modes do I have? Tell me. Launch modes. Tell me.
2.
To launch.
How many launch modes? One is cluster.
Cluster.
Cluster and
Another one
step.
is
Step execution.
step execution. By the time you launch the cluster, how many steps it will take basically to come to the action? Tell me.
3. Starting, waiting,
Starting,
Running and
running and waiting.
running and
Waiting.
waiting. Agreed, all of you? Correct?
Yes.
But in step execution, starting, same running. You know what will happen in the running state? Any idea?
Running the job.
Spark
Yeah, you
jar,
get all
Spark
the-
submit.
Uh,
Spark submit will happen in running. Starting, running. What would be the last one? Any idea?
Terminating.
terminate.
Exactly. You need not to terminate it. It will go to the starting state, running state, automatically terminating state. Let's see what is my current state. It is, can you see it change to running state, all of you? Yeah? Yes?
Yes.
So if you go to the steps, this guy will be running shortly. See, it gone into running state. Running state means it's about to start. It is almost started the Spark application, right? See here, this pending changes to running within hardly 15 seconds to something, right? It's changed to running state now. Cluster is in running state. This running state will run. Can you see the running started, all of you? Actually,
Yes,
yeah. Now it has gone to running state. Now the cluster is in running state right now. Now have a check. Summary, it is in running state. Still the Spark job is running at the backend. All right. Still the Spark job is running at the backend. Have a check. Can you see it got completed? All of you?
Yes.
Yeah. Job is completed. Since the job is completed, check over here. Keep checking up here. The cluster gets terminated. Can you see that? Makes sense, all of you? Yeah. The cluster got into starting state, then running state for a while. It completed the step here, and it has gone getting into terminating state. This is what the step execution is. What is step execution? Simply the cluster gets turned on, running state, where the Spark submit will happen, and it will go to terminating state. This is what we call it as a step execution. If you go back and check the target, folks, all of you check out here. If you go back and check this dev target, all right, some time ago I deleted the data. Dir will be sitting up here. Can you see available and not available here? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Folks, I removed that object part at the back end. I removed that object part not to get any backup. So you're not getting that object folders. So available customers and not available customers got generated using step execution. CIDR got created available and not available customers. That's the reason it created a available and not available customers. So that's the reason the cluster gone into terminating state. Kalas, got done. That's it, terminated. Folks, this is our cluster who have done that work. Agreed so far?
Yes, Sai.
How is this execution, folks? How is this execution? Was it interesting understanding? This one?
Yes, sir.
Interesting, Sai.
This is a pure AWS deployment. Not complete 100%, 70% we reached. First, we started our cluster in the cluster mode. Then we waited and we developed the code and we terminated it. Then it's a time to touch the step execution. Then I launched the cluster, ran the job, and terminated the cluster. That's how this particular job is done. Now, did you understood what is this word mean? EMR step execution dev.
Yes.
Fine. Folks, one important point to discuss. All right. One important point to discuss now. What we did in EMR project code dev. Manually created the cluster. Manually executed the code. Manually terminated the cluster. Agreed or not, all of you? Getting it or not?
Yes.
Manually created the cluster. Check out, folks. Very important point to discuss now. In the first step, I'm talking about AWS project code dev. Manually created the cluster. Manually executed the code. Manually terminated the cluster. Make sense or not? All of you? Done. Let's bring the next one. EMR step execution. Now you tell me what are the steps. You tell me.
Manually created the cluster.
Create the step execution.
No. One second. Manually created the step execution. Yes or no, folks? Is it not I created a manual step execution? Yes or no?
Yes, Sai.
Yeah. Automatically ran the Spark submit. Automatically terminated the cluster. All of you agree my point?
Yes, Sai.
Yes.
Understand the difference. Understand the difference, folks. Very important difference. In the first project development, manually I created a cluster. Manually executed the code. Manually terminated the cluster. But in step execution, manually created a step execution. Agreed or not? All of you here?
Yes.
I created it manually. After I created manually, that went automated. That's okay. But I manually created a step execution. What is manually? Hey, I gone into create cluster, right? Then I created a dev deployment. All right. Then step execution. Then everything. Is it not manual work? Everything is a manual work. All of you. Yes.
Yes.
It's a manual work. Manually created a step execution. Then automatically ran the Spark submit. Automatically terminated the cluster. But how many manuals I have in the first step? Tell me. How many manuals do I have in the first step?
3.
You tell me. 3. 3 manual work. But in step execution in the jar, how many manuals we have? Tell me.
One.
Only one. Only one. Remaining two are automated. But is it not still manually exist here? Manual work. Do you think in the production environment? Do you think the production environment we go every day manually, create a cluster and do Spark execution? You tell me. Do we do it manually every day?
No.
No, sir, nobody gives access.
We don't have that access. Still the game is on. Still we are incomplete. This is not step execution doesn't mean that we completed it. Still we are manually creating a step execution. I put a message to my boss, right? Boss, I have created a jar, exported to, I created a jar, put it to S3, created a step execution. I've created a jar, put it to S3, created a step execution. All right. Create a step execution, validated it, all looks good. Everything looks good. Created a step execution. Shall we take it to production? Sai is saying. Shall we take it to production? Folks, everybody is with me? All of you are with me? Yes?
Yes.
Then my boss replied back, we can't take it to production. No. We can't take it to production. Still the manual work involves here. Creating a step execution is again a manual work. Yes or no, folks? Yes or no? Yeah?
Yeah.
Creating a step execution is again a manual work. You have created a step execution manually. Automatically the Spark Summit done, automatically the cluster got terminated, boss. But still you do something manually here. I asked, right? What can be the solution for automating the creation of cluster also? Is it not a valid question, all of you? Sai asked, okay, what can be the possible solution to automate the creation of cluster also? Then my boss replied back one word. What is it, folks?
Command runner.
Next step.
Scheduling
Command runner is the guy who can help you to start a cluster, to run the job, terminate the cluster. Everything can be automated. Start a cluster, run the job, terminate the cluster can also be automated. Now, folks, first we launch the cluster mode. Have a check. First, we completed the AWS project development. Then we designed the step execution. That is also completed. What's the third most important point? Command runner design. Right? Still, the game is on. It's not yet completed. Still, we have to automate it. You should not daily go to the production cluster, create a cluster, and run every time. Why? That's not an automation. It's a manual. How can we automate it? Who is the only guy can help me out? Tell me.
Command runner.
NiFi.
Not NiFi. Simple command runner. Command runner.
No, my question.
No, that's
was like
scheduling
we
in NiFi.
schedule
Don't
the
put it.
thing
No,
in-
no. Leave it with NiFi. No, not that. Command runner script is different. command runner script. We call it as a command runner script. Where do I have that command runner script? Folks, you tell me. Some time ago, I launched a deployment cluster. Everyone remember the deployment cluster? Yeah.
Yes,
Dev deployment. Yeah. Okay. Can anyone tell me here, what are the things I followed from the start? You tell me what I followed here. You tell me. Yeah. Steps followed in command runner script. Steps followed in step execution. Can you tell me what did I just do in the steps followed in step execution? First, what did I do? Gave the name of the cluster. Correct, all of you? Gave the name of the cluster. Agreed?
Yes, sir.
Then I selected step execution.
type of step execution is launched.
Selected Spark application. Selected what application? Tell me. Spark application.
Spark.
Configured Spark submit.
Right.
And gave auto terminate. There is an auto terminate option. I didn't check that. It automatically checked auto terminate. This is what I have done. This says I have done it manually. Gave the name of the cluster, selected the step execution, selected Spark application. That's what I have done. What did I do? Manually, what I have done? Created a cluster, gave dev deployment, right? Then selected step execution and gave Spark application and configured it here. For example, I configured something here, right? Then it came down, selected the nodes. Number of nodes also selected. Yes or no, folks? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Number of nodes selection, right? And termination, auto termination I have provided because here I provide as continued auto termination here.
Type.
Now, yeah, cluster type also. Selected the number of nodes and cluster type. You know what? Whatever I have done it manually for that cluster, especially that cluster, dev deployment cluster, especially the dev deployment cluster, right? This is my dev deployment cluster, right? Dev deployment. Whatever I have generated here, AWS gives you as a script. Can you believe it? AWS records every action you have done. Every action you have done, AWS records your script. AWS records your every action. You getting it, all of you here? Yes,
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Where by the time you gave the name, AWS records it. By the time you gave a step execution, it records it. Selected Spark, records it. Configuration, records it. Number of nodes, record. Cluster type, it records. Everything, auto termination records this. And AWS give that to you as a script. It will give every action of you as an automation script. That script is sitting in this page only. That automation script is sitting in the page which you are seeing in my screen. Did you see anywhere AWS CLI export?
Sir.
Yes, on the top right.
AWS CLI export, all of you.
Yes, sir.
Click it. You will see a big command, very big command. Check out. I click this box. Every action you performed in this cluster is monitored or actually recorded with a command here. Let's click this. Ready, all of you? Curious to know?
Sorry.
Shoot.
Yes, sir.
Did you see a big script here, all of you? Big lines. Is it understandable or crap side?
Not
Okay.
understandable.
Let's take this cluster. Now I'll show you what AWS done for us. Is it a big setup? Big one? Now, I'll show you only few areas. Concentrate. Concentrate. Is it understandable? What I just
Yes, created a
Yes.
cluster.
Create cluster.
Spark application.
Of application. Script.
Just package.
Snapshot. Okay, fine. Submit. Spark.
Submit.
Automatically submitted it.
make sense, all of you here?
True.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Start a cluster with Hadoop and Spark. Run that Spark submit. Get auto terminated. What is your name of the cluster? It is dev. Folks, this is your command runner script, folks. This is furthermore automation. Whatever I have done in my step execution manually, AWS is giving you as a executable script. Executable script. What Sai did some time ago, AWS is telling me today, hey, what you did some time ago, you created a cluster boss with these two applications and you configured one Spark submit steps. Then you made an auto terminate of this and the name you gave is dev deployment. Getting it or not? All of you here? Yes? Yes or no? All of you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this particular script is an executable script. What is this executable script? This is your shell script. If this is your complete final mantra of execution, this is your final mantra of execution. If you execute this script, again, folks, this is your final mantra. What does that mean? This is your executable script. What is that executable script side? Check out. Maybe OS labels are not required. 1 minute. Idle tomato is also not required. Yeah. This is my dev script. What this script will do? If I execute this script, what it will do? Tell me. It will create what? Create cluster.
Cluster.
With name and Spark. It will run this step. Then once a step is done, what it will do? It will
Auto terminate.
Let's change the name. Shall we change it? What's the name? Shall we change it? What's a very hot topic in India today? Without politics. Tell me.
Chandrayaan 3.
Okay, Chandrayaan. Okay, Chandrayaan 3. Okay. This is clear. What is the cluster name it is? I'm creating. It is Chandrayaan 3 cluster. Spelling is correct, no?
Sorry.
Okay. The cluster name I'm giving it as what? Chandrayaan 3 cluster. Now have a check. This is my executable script. If I shoot this cluster, folks, if I shoot this cluster, this command, it will create the cluster. Run the Spark job, terminates the cluster automatically. Now let me do one thing. Let me remove in S3, shall we remove the target data for a while? Yeah, again. Let's remove the target data. Removing it again. Done. First, I have generated using manual. Then I have generated using step execution. Now I'm going to generate using, folks, command runner. See, this is your executable script. Now take the script, open a command line. Now I am going to execute the script. This is a final executable script. This script, AWS EMR script, will create the cluster, run the job, terminate the cluster. What is the cluster name I gave here? Chandrayaan 3 cluster. Have a check. Now, if I shoot this command, all right, it will shoot this command. I just shooted this command. All right. Now what this command will do, this command will create the cluster. 1 minute, receive. Okay. One second. It's command line issue. Go to Git bash. That's the reason I asked you to download Git bash. Okay. Git bash will remove that all the issues. Now, this is my cluster. This is my whole command. Now, by the time I shoot this command, folks, it creates a cluster and it will generate. Can you see something it has generated back? All of you here? Yes or no? Yes. Now have a check.
Sir.
If I go back to the cluster here, if I go back to the cluster terminal, right? Your Chandrayaan 3 cluster will be getting started. Can you see this, all of you? Makes sense, all of you? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, Sai.
See, here I did not even select it. I have done a step execution. Whatever I done a step execution, AWS has provided me as a executable script. Now, this script, if I execute, it will create the cluster, it will run the Spark job, and it will terminate the cluster also. Is it not a very, very good automation? All of you actually. Create the cluster, run job, terminate. Create the cluster, run job, terminate. Now that's the reason. Now the cluster will be, now did I create cluster and went in right now? Did I create a step execution manually right now? Tell me. No.
No.
I didn't do anything manual here this time. Completely automated. Completely automated. Because whatever I done in this dev cluster, right? AWS gave me as a CLI command. So this is your final gold copy of the command in real time. You have final gold copy of this command. All right. One sec, let me remove. Sorry. I mean, sorry, Rajma. Yeah. Removed. So this is your final gold copy. This command you have to design. Okay. What cluster I have to trigger? What application I need to give? How many steps you have? If it is 1 step, give 1 step, or else 2 steps, 2 steps, give like that. Then auto terminate it. Finally, folks, this Chandrayaan 3 cluster will start, run this steps. Can you see the step here? The same step, all of you. Yeah. Start, run the step, terminate. Who is doing this? Which script is doing it? It is, we call this script as what? Command runner script. This command runner script is your final mantra. That's it. Final gold script. Gold command. Right? It will start, run and terminate. So that's how this cluster is getting turned on. Chandrayaan 3 cluster. Now it started. It is running. Slowly this pending changes to running. Then it gets auto terminate. Start, run, terminate. Which script is doing it? Tell me. It is command runner script. Command runner script. You understood the third guy right now? All of you here?
Yes, sir.
So now the step is running state. Right? I didn't touch the AWS console. Did I touch AWS console to automate this? I did not touch AWS console. I didn't even gone inside to do any manual work. One guy is doing all this command runner script. So this guy completed and it will terminate also. See, it is getting terminated. Started, it ran, got terminating. Now, if you go back and check, right, you'll have the CIDR in the respective available, not available. Make sense, all of you? Yeah? Generated?
Sorry.
This is furthermore design. Now, in the first dev environment, manually created a cluster, manually executed the code, manually terminated the cluster. In the step execution, manually created a step execution, automated Spark submit, automatically terminated the cluster. What about command runner? Now you tell me. Automatically created cluster, automatically ran Spark submit, automatically terminated the cluster. Makes sense, all of you right now? Yes. Manual, automation. Automation, and automation. How is this session so far? Okay.
Wonderful.
Good, sir.
Now, if any question comes on interviews regarding the AWS deployment, can you answer it right now? Still the game is on. We didn't touch the last guy, correct? We completed till this point.
By shell scripting also we can mention though. Do you have experience?
I'll tell you. I'll open time for questions. I'll come. Right? So, development, step execution development, command runner design also. Now the entire, this guy, the third cluster, what is the third cluster we created? Chandrayaan 3 cluster. It got terminated. See, this guy manually created, manually ran Spark shell code, manually terminated. This guy manually created a step execution, ran automated Spark submit, automated termination. This guy automated creation, automated the Spark submit, automatically termination. This is what the complete, see, it's not yet completed. Still we are in the dev environment. The things are not yet gone into production. The next step is production. Next step is production. All of you have your clouds ready. All of you have your things ready. You are going to execute your own clusters today. Maybe in the second half. Second half, I'll start with a questionnaire round. Then we'll go with prod deployment, kind of string interpolation I have to do. Then we'll take it to. Then we'll end the session today. Somehow EMR is supporting me today. Morning it was completely out. Somehow like clusters are getting created now. Fine, folks. Now can you answer it in interviews if any question comes under deployment, command runner executions and everything? You should be able to answer. Second half, I'll start with the questionnaire round. Fine, folks. I believe yesterday we could not able to send any cashbacks because of my schedule, completely hectic. So definitely we'll start today. We're trying a level best to cross the limits, but UPI limits, you know that we cannot spend, we cannot use 20 a day, but somehow we are using 40 or 60 with multiple phones. So we'll definitely ensure that it's getting completed by Tuesday or Wednesday. If you're not receiving, surely you can respond to us. When I say it is completed, please respond to us. Check with your referrals whether they paid the fee, whether they continued. Then I can send the fee. Then I can lock it. I can close your account. Then regarding the referrals, even yesterday, Hema and Gomati received the informations. Gomati or Hema will miss it, folks, because Gomati will send around 1,500 messages a day in WhatsApp. Old batches, new batches, current batches. So messages will float down. So I'm the only point of contact for the referrals. All right. One got reopened yesterday. I think 2 are available right now. But we are planning to close it by tomorrow or something because we cannot extend it very long time. So please ask your reference to call only me, no Hema or no Gomati, since we have 1 or 2 available. Once it get closed, even it reopens, I may not inform you. The reason in fact, Gomati and my team is taking care of my WhatsApp, but however, we don't want to spend more time on it. So kindly ensure any reference, ask them to call only me. We're planning to close very